Hey everyone, good afternoon. Welcome back to B&B Hockey Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Bloxel, with my co-host, Mr. Matthew Balzer. On today, the 7th year anniversary of the passing of Vancouver Canuck forward Rick Rypien. Obviously, concussions, brain injuries continue to create a lot of depression. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that because they're still in court talking about that stuff. But definitely depression has hurt a lot of NHL players, especially some of the ones that are retired. And it's something that we shouldn't take lightly. But if Matt, you want to touch on that, we're going to then get you to go into a few of today's news for potential signings and a PTO. Then we're going to get into our 31 teams in 31 days with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Matt, take it away.
Yeah, it's sort of crazy to think it's been 7 years already since the passing of Rick Rypien. It's just as I remember, he was one of the toughest players I have ever seen play in the NHL. It didn't matter what the size of the other guy was. Like he would beat the crap out of you, basically. I think
Pound for pound, the best fighter in the NHL.
Yeah, it doesn't even come close from what I've seen. But yeah, his memory is remembered, and with guys like Kevin Bieksa being a big influence on depression and setting up a place to talk if you're going through that. Getting into today's news, hard to transition from that into this, but the Anaheim Ducks have re-signed Ondrej Kase to a 3-year deal with a $2.6 million cap hit. He had 20 goals, 38 points in 66 games, and is going to be a big part of the Ducks' younger players coming up this year. And a professional tryout was given to Mark Letestu by the Florida Panthers. Could be a good depth forward signing, and I still think he'll end up signing somewhere, if not with the Florida Panthers, with another team in the NHL. He had 23 points last year in 80 games between Edmonton and Columbus. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he makes the team or if he plays good enough to get on another team.
Well, let's get into our team preview of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I'm going to tell you, they're outside of one forward in their 30s. The majority of the forwards are in their mid-20s. They have a couple that are around the 27 age, but they have some that are 21, 22. One of the youngest teams in the NHL at the forward position, and I'm just looking. They are 26 years old on average. But like I said, the one player that's in their 30s raises their age limit. But what a powerhouse this team is. Why don't you start us off with their forwards?
All right. So this was the highest scoring team in the NHL last year, with 290 goals for last year, and they'll look to top that this year. The big line: JT Miller, Steven Stamkos, and Nikita Kucherov. This is one of the most deadliest duos in Stamkos and Kucherov. Kucherov gained 100 points last year, 39 goals. Steven Stamkos was finally able to get a clean bill of health for an entire year, gained 86 points in 78 games. Though his goals were down last year at only 27. We're usually expecting him to get the 40-plus goal range, but he became more of a playmaker with Kucherov on his line, doing most of the goal scoring. And JT Miller, the other big piece in the Ryan McDonagh trade that came over, and he fit in well on that top line. Their second line is Andre Palat, Tyler Johnson, and Braden Point. This was another line that could be a top line in the NHL. Braden Point, absolute breakout year with 32 goals and 66 points in the full season. And he's still only on his entry-level deal. I think he's only making $687K right now. So the production for the money is crazy good. And Tyler Johnson had a bit of a down year, I think, from what they were expecting, but still a pretty good year with 50 points in 82 games. still a really good centerman and face-off man in the NHL. And Andre Palat is a big playmaker on that line. He had a big injury this year, which limited to only 56 games, but he still had 35 points for the year. The third line is Alex Killorn, Anthony Cirelli, and Yanni Gourde. Yanni Gourde had a great rookie season, bit of an older for rookie, but he still ended up getting 64 points in 82 games, which is great. A great year for him. Anthony Cirelli will be a rookie this year. He came up late towards the end of last season. He had 37 points in 51 games in the American League before getting called up. And was a big part in the playoffs. He got 3 points in 17 games and should be centering that third line. And the fourth line will be Adam Erne, Cedric Paquette, and Ryan Callahan. Callahan has been dealing with many injuries since he got traded over from the New York Rangers to Tampa Bay. And with that big cap hit of $5.8 million is one of the things that is limiting Tampa Bay from maybe picking up Erik Karlsson in a trade with that huge cap hit. And Paquette and Erne are more grinding players that will provide some depth. And two other players to look that will get some playing time is Corey Conacher and Andy Andreoff. Conacher can go in and out of the lineup and is still somewhat of a productive player that can sprinkle into that top nine if need be for injuries.
This forward unit has offense coming out on at least three lines, and I expect Adam Erne to actually jump up and maybe get some more playing time with the line, the third or the second line even this year. Another young player that they added to last year. So these guys can score in many different ways. You don't want to give them a power play because their first line power play is unbelievable, and they can burn you many different ways. So defensemen, man, they have, in my opinion, one of the top defensemen in the league, or the D-core in general, not just defensemen, but they're right up there with the Nashville Predators, in my opinion. They're 1 and 1A. And we're going to start it off because their entire defense rolls around the 6'6", 225-pound defenseman Victor Hedman, who finished last year with 63 points. He does it all for them. He plays offensive. He plays defensive. He plays physical. He's just an all-around one of the best defensemen in the entire game today. And his defense partner, Anton Stallman, is one of the best shutdown defensemen. Those two guys they log a lot of ice time, as does this next pair. I like to call them the New York Ranger connection, Ryan McDonough and Dan Girardi, two of the best that came over in separate trades from the Rangers, adding a lot of depth to this Tampa Bay defense. We know that they can both log a lot of ice time as well, and they're still in their late 20s. Their third line's not chopped liver either. Rookie this year, Mikhail Sergachev, who had 40 points as a rookie defenseman. And if you watch some of the highlights, he had some very creative plays coming from that point, especially on the second line power play. And he plays with the giant defenseman Braden Coburn, who plays both left side or right side. And that defense pairing, even though it's the third pairing in Tampa Bay, could be the number one pairing in a lot of markets around the NHL. They're also going to see time from Slater Kukuk, along with Jake Dotchin, who both are only 24 years old, still fairly young. It's like our team we talked about the other day. We have to be 25 years old to play, right? These guys are 24 years. Kukuk got into 35 games last year. Dotchin got into 48 games. Both will be looking for ice time and fighting for time. But the beautiful thing about having 8 defensemen like this is you can give guys that get banged up, you can give them sometimes the night off and play someone else so that you're healthy for the important games. You're healthy for the home stretch, and you're healthy for the playoffs. So my opinion, one of the best and deepest defensemen in the league, right up there with the Nashville Predators. What do you got on defense? And then take us into the goaltenders.
Yeah, yeah. So Victor Hedman is my favorite NHL defenseman to watch in the NHL. Yeah, he had 63 points in only 77 games, and finally won a Norris Trophy for his efforts this past year. The one thing I will say with Tampa Bay is that sometimes John Cooper likes to dress 7 defensemen and go with 11 forwards. So you could see guys like Kuku and Dotchin actually get into a little bit of game time. And even Sergachev at the beginning of the year was only getting like 9 minutes of ice time, and about like half of that was like just power play time. Until eventually he started getting the coach's trust and more ice time as it went along. One touch that I want to put here is Strawman, Girardi, and Coburn are all UFAs at the end of the year. So you could see with some other guys that they got to re-sign, some more younger guys that we'll get to later to replace them so they can stay under the cap and keep some of these other guys that their contracts will be coming up, like Braden Point and Yanni Gord will both need new contracts at the end of the year.
All right, and in goal, they've got one of the best, and they lack a little bit of well, I guess their backup's not that inexperienced, but they're not as deep at this position as they have been in the past.
Yeah, so Andrei Vasilevsky was up for the Vezina Trophy this year, and he probably would have won it if he didn't have a few struggles towards the end of the season. But yeah, great year, 44 wins in 65 games, 8 shutouts, and a .920 save percentage. One of the best young goalies in the league, and should be a future Vezina winner in the next couple of years. And on a great contract, he still has 2 more years at only $3.5 million, which is great money if the Tampa Bay Lightning can win the Stanley Cup in the next couple of years before they have to buck up and pay him around probably like $8 million or something like that. And yeah, and their backup, Louis Domingue, who they brought over from Arizona, which he was just terrible in Arizona. And he started to get his game going a little bit with Tampa Bay as he started to get into some games. But his save percentage was still below 900. His goals against average well above 3. So it'll be interesting to see if he can finally have a bounce back year. But playing in front of Tampa Bay, when you're going to get a lot of goals going in the other net, you don't really have to be you just have to be average if you're the backup goalie.
Well, if you're liking us on YouTube, B&B Hockey Talk, also after you subscribe to us on YouTube, check out the save of the year, in my opinion, Vasilevsky on Anze Kopitar against the LA Kings. It was ridiculous. But again, don't forget to subscribe to us, B&B Hockey Talk on YouTube. Like us and follow us on Facebook. And that's a little segue for you guys there. Let's get into the prospects. They have one of the best defenseman prospects, I think, outside of the NHL right now. How does this guy crack this lineup? I think you said there is 3 UFAs going into next year, and I think that's going to be his key. But Adam Foote's son, Cal Foote, who starred and captained the Kelowna Rockets this year, 60 games, 70 points, just a solid defenseman. Finally signed his first contract, played for the Tampa's farm team, the Syracuse Crunch, to finish off the season. In 6 games, he had 4 points. In the playoffs, he played 7 games and had 2 points. But what was more impressive is he was logging around 23 to 26 minutes per night as a young player. This guy is a stud. And do they find room for him, or are they going to continue to season him one more year down in Syracuse? That's my question to you, Matt. So before you answer that, a couple other prospects. Matthew Joseph, a right winger that went 4th round in 2015. He had 53 points in 70 games last year in Syracuse and 7 points in 7 games. He's a guy that's got some offensive explosion. Like they need any more of that on their current forward roster, but they do, guys. They do have some studs coming up. Another guy is centerman Mitchell Stevens, who was a 2nd-round pick in 2015. He had only 41 points in 70 games last year, 6 points in 7 games in the playoffs. but they absolutely love this guy. They're calling him the heart and soul player who's going to replace Ryan Callahan in this lineup. They really like him. They even I've even heard Steve Yzerman talk about this guy as a potential future captain one day for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So those are my three prospects that stand out. I know there's a lot more. Why don't you take us through the goaltender prospect and a handful of other guys, Matt, and also share your thoughts on Cal Foote.
Yeah, so Cal Foote, I think he's going to start in the American League, but I think it might be tough for them to hold him back, and I think he will get into some gameplay, and especially with a guy like Braden Coburn, who's up there in age. I could see them moving him so he can get a spot in their lineup. So their big goalie prospect is goalie Connor Ingram. Had gone to 35 games down in Syracuse last year in the American League. Went 20-11-0 with a .914 save percentage and 4 shutouts. He should be the prominent number one goalie for them this year in the American League. And if a guy like Louis Domingue struggles, could get up with the big club to get some starts this year. But yeah, a guy like Taylor Radish, I'm really pumped to see. He had 83 points in 58 games. A split between Erie and Sault Ste. Marie in the OHL, and then another 34 points in 24 games in the playoffs. This is a big winger who has top 6 potential, and is a guy I cannot wait to see. Another guy, second rounder in 2016, Boris Kachuk, 85 points in 58 games. And another 37 points in 24 playoff games for Sault Ste. Marie.
Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah, Sault Ste. Marie. I wrote the abbreviation down, so I was trying to remember off the top of my head. But yeah, another offensive forward that just had an incredible year in the O. And I forgot if you brought up Matthew Joseph already.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but that's another forward that had a great year in the American Hockey League, and is another guy that I don't even know how they're going to make room for all these guys up front. But yeah, it's just one of the just a lot of depth coming up in the organization. A lot of guys pushing for spots. So guys like Earn and Paquette could be fringe players that could be moved to get these guys, like a guy like Mitchell Stevens, who I think could move into the bottom 6 to start the year this year to get those guys into the lineup.
Well, one thing's for sure, General Manager Steve Yzerman has done an amazing job with this team, getting value from people, some of his players on decent contracts. They have so many youthful players that can crack this lineup over the next year or two that can replace other young players that they have. So salary cap-wise, they are close to the cap now. But I don't think it's going to be an issue for them moving forward. I mean, it's only an issue because they're trying to bring in a superstar right now like Erik Karlsson, right? But Ryan Callahan seems to have the only contract that's pretty ugly. And we keep hearing that they're openly shopping it around, but I think they're only going to do that if they make a splash and go for a player like Erik Karlsson. Otherwise, they can stay put and be where they are. 113 points last year, first in their division. What is it? The Northeast Division, right? Yeah. So where do you see them finishing this year? And your final thoughts on them?
Yeah. So I see them finishing in first place in the Atlantic and in the Eastern Conference, and a potential Cup champion this year. I think I'd actually have them going to the Cup final this year. They came up just short going up against Washington in the conference final. But I see them going all the way and potentially winning the Stanley Cup this year. Yeah, as you said, Yzerman's done a great job of organizing this team, and he has all the pieces in place. Maybe they want to make one more move on their back end if they can get Karlsson, but and if they do end up getting Karlsson, man, I don't want to go up against the Lightning on any given night. But yeah, I see them as a Cup champion this year.
Excellent. Yeah, I see them finishing around the same. 110 to potentially 120 points this year. First in their division, with Toronto and Boston battling it out against each other again. And we talked about this and we laugh how Toronto will probably end up playing Boston again in the playoffs, which we don't mind. It makes for entertaining TV, that's for sure. And lots of love with those kisses. But Tampa's going to have I see them potentially winning their division. I don't know. Playoffs to me are always a crapshoot because it really depends who's healthy, who's going, and what the matchups are. Because sometimes, even though you finish ahead, if you finish with a matchup that you're uncomfortable with, anything can happen now in today's NHL. So if you like our episode, please hit the like button. Comment about what you liked about it. Comment about the Tampa Bay Lightning or your thoughts on former tough guy Rick Rypien and mental illness, depression. Let us know what you think about that. And like us on YouTube, subscribe. And this has been B&B Hockey Talk. We thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to be back here tomorrow with another episode of 31 Teams in 31 Days with that hated Toronto Maple Leafs. So join us tomorrow, guys. Have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you all soon.